And whenever you're ready, David, you can go ahead.
I want to salute all of you again. I'm David, and I'm happy to see some familiar faces from the last crash course that we had on React. And today I'm happy to introduce you to Redux with React. And that is, as I put emphasis on the fact that it's with React, because Redux can actually be used with all sorts of other JavaScript libraries such as Vue or Angular, things like that. Right. So I won't really keep you back on that, and I'll just start talking about what we'll go through. First of all, we'll talk about the motivation behind Redux and why we should use that and why we should choose Redux in the first place. Why not just use the state that React has already built in it? We'll talk about how does Redux work. We'll do some coding with React, and then we'll add Redux on top of that. And in the end, we'll just deploy to GitHub Pages. Okay. What I want to ask Rob to do is to not forget to put in the chat. There's a GitHub repository that already has some code that's been set up and that has specific components that we will use and styles and things like that. So Rob, can you do that for me?
Yep, done. This will also be in the description if anyone's watching on YouTube. We'll put it there as well.
Okay, great. So without further ado, now what's the motivation behind Redux? Well, you remember, or maybe you don't, but I'll just refresh that for you. When we worked with React, we didn't really dwell too much into the state and having components that are passed down state and things like that. But imagine at some point, I will just refresh that for you again. In React, components work in a sort of waterfall manner. So you have a parent, a root component that builds all the others components from the root downwards. So let's say if you have like two branches, two components that start from the root, that at some point you have two children, and you want to somehow communicate between them. So this state of this component has to interact with the state of this component, or you just want this component to use this state. It gets quite difficult to do with plain React because you have to pass down the state from the root. The root has to contain that state, and then you have to pass down the functions to change all that state. And it's just a bit trouble. It just gets messy. And at some point, you might be like, well, where does this state come from actually? What's the component that contains the state definition and that actually contains the method, and so on. So it gets quite hard to manage like that. But with Redux, we can actually make this quite easy and intuitive. And how does that work? Well, Redux is a centralized state container. And what this means is that in Redux, there will be a so-called store that actually stores the whole state of the application. And then each component can just subscribe to that store and ask for a specific state or some specific substate or something like that. So let's say I will have some image that describes that, but let's say now we have something like a counter that gets updated on one component. If we have another component that now wants, for some reason, to get that counter, say it wants to use it in an alert or something like that, now it can just tell to the store that it wants to have access to that counter. The store will give the value of that counter. And whenever the counter value changes in this component using an action, the store will update that value and will share it again with the other component. So it's really easy now to decentralize everything in regards to state and set state, and to just have something like a database. That's how other people also describe Redux, like a database for state that has actions which change that state, and have reducers that actually know how to handle those actions, and then that results in a state change. But that's quite hard to imagine just like this. So I will show you in a second a slide that actually explains that really well. And what I really said at the beginning as well is that it works with any UI layer. So you can really use Redux on its own with other frameworks or libraries if you want to. But it's really nice to learn how it actually works so that you can switch to other state containers as well, state management containers, because they kind of all use a similar approach when it comes to controlling the state of an application. And I will also show you that it's really nice to debug with Redux, because we will have a so-called dev tool that can be used with Chrome to see the state of the actual application. So let's now explain clearly how Redux work. Although I can say that with Redux, it's actually easier to learn it by coding, because you can actually see how the flow of the application works by doing the specific parts that Redux depends on than in looking at some theory. So I will just present a sort of diagram that explains how Redux works. And like I said, we have a view, whatever that is, some component, some application, and we have the store. So these are the two main things that we will work with. And what the view does is that it subscribes to the store, as in it says to the store that it now wants to see a specific state out of there. If you have, for example, something like an authentication system, you might have a navigation bar that wants to use the authentication state to actually maybe showcase a name in the nav bar or something like that. So that's how the view, which in our case now would be the navigation bar, would subscribe to the store, telling it needs the state of the authentication state. And at the store will constantly, whenever the authentication state changes, it will update the view, the value that the view uses as well. So then let's say now the view does something with that. So we have the navigation, but we also have the authentication component, right? So the authentication component is responsible to authenticate users. So what the authentication component does is, let's say we type in our name and password and we press the submit button or log in. It will have to check for those values. So like call a database server, check if the values are correct, and then get some response back and maybe log in the user. So to do that, that's actually an action. And what how Redux interprets this is that it expects a view to dispatch an action specific for that. So an action is just a function which does something. In our case, it will authenticate users. And once the action finishes doing its part, it will dispatch the changes to the reducer. And what this means is that once, let's say, the user has been authenticated and the server sent back some information about the user, we now want to send out that information to the store and store it there. But we can't really just send out the information because it might be a different type. Say we have an authentication system, we have alerts and things like that. So there is a sort of pattern that the specific data follows. So for that, we have reducers, which take the objects and reduce them into the state that they have to be. So this will really make more sense when we'll start to code, and you'll see how actually the reducer will take a so-called payload from the action. It will set the state now, it will update the state with these values, and then those values get updated in the store. So the whole cycle repeats again. It's really easy once you see how that works. Now, there's one thing I have to add and have to mention, and that is the thing with actions in Redux, with plain actions, is that they just dispatch changes. So if they dispatch changes, they just give out some object, right? So that means if we also want to do something in that action, and 99% of the time we want to do something, let's say we want to call our server and authenticate the user, we actually have to do some more work. And that work has actually a term, and it's called a thunk. And it will be a bit strange to see at first, I have to admit, because it's more of a JavaScript syntax thing that makes it look so complicated. But actually what it does is, if the action is a function, if we now have a thunk, that's actually a function inside a function. So you can have a function, which is your action, let's say authenticate, which receives some parameters, your username and password, let's say. And then inside of that, it has a function, which is called a thunk, which actually calls the server, does what it does, and then at the end, using that data, it dispatches the changes. You'll see that how we apply that, and it will make more sense. But right. So if everyone who wants to follow along got the repository link and they've downloaded the information from there, I will just jump now into the project and just explain what's been set up for us here. Just before that, does anyone have any sort of question with regards to what we've talked so far? No? Okay. So I will just continue then. So what I did here was to just clean up the initial project that's set up with Create React App. And I created some components that are used in this portfolio page that we will work on today. We kind of started working on it previously, but it was more of just showing off how React works. But now we'll actually make a portfolio page that's more interactive and dynamic. So what I have here is just the, I didn't want to do that. Okay, I had to hide the controls. So what I did was I created some components like a landing, a project, and a project card that actually are showcased on our website. And what they do is just, we have a sort of landing page. Let me just show it to you and I can explain it as we go. We have a landing page that has some information like my name, some subheader that maybe tells some status about me, and then some more information, maybe some description. I don't know, you can just add whatever you want here, and then an image of myself. And then here, there would be some links, maybe for GitHub, LinkedIn, and Stack Overflow. And then what we would like to do is to have a React app where this is the main page. It's like the slash. If you go to the link, this would be something like this, or /home or something like that. And then from here, somebody can just click see projects. They will go to the /projects link, and there we will presumably load projects which are repositories from our GitHub. And we'll just load the project name here. And then if they click more, they will open up a project, and we'll get a page that starts to look like this, which will have a project name, a project description. And then this will be the README file of that project, which gets rendered on the screen like this. It's just something from where you can work on, and I guess you can make more interesting stuff. But yeah, this is just the coding behind it. We have a landing component, and this landing component has just some basic HTML, like GSX actually, that just adds some images that are imported locally. And that's basically it. And what I did here is, for each project, I have this for loop, this map actually, that for each of the projects, and I just had 8 projects, random projects. I just create a project card. And for now, this is kind of dummy. It just has static information, and just it's just shown like this. And we have a project, which is this part here. And this one has, again, a name, a short description, some image, and the README part. And this README part is another component. And this is kind of the part that will make Redux use. And you'll see great stuff awaits us. Now, the first thing that we should do is, I think we should create some routes for our app, just to make the flow between each page nicer so that we can actually see why we would need Redux at one point. So to do that, in the repo, you also have all the dependencies in the package.json. You also have the information set up for the deployment. The only thing that you will have to change there is this username, because this is my username. You can change this to whatever you want. But anything than that, every dependency is already mentioned here, and you can install that if you just run npm install or something like that. It will work. It will install everything for you, and you can just run the React app as usual. So to actually create routing, we have to import a couple of things. One of them is the browser route, as we'll just import it as router, just to not put the full browser route name. We also need a route, which will define a specific route, say //projects/projects and so on. And we also need a switch, which will enable us to actually change between these specific links. And this we have to import from Preact router DOM. Right. And what we have to do is to encapsulate our whole part from here with router, I'm sorry. So we have to add in router. It's just like adding another component, and we just encapsulated our whole application with router. So now if I did not make this mistake, which one was the name of it? I had a typo there. Okay, probably had a typo there. If you look at the app, right now we have, there's just something that's related to the repository info, so don't mind that. But what we did is now we provided some form of routing to our application, and we can now start to define specific links throughout our app to actually start changing between /projects and so on. So to do that, we have to encapsulate everything with a switch, So we again encapsulate everything with a switch. And now let's say this class name app, I think this has to be on all of the components. So if you want something to appear on all the pages, we have to put that before the switch. And I have to properly close it at the end of it, so that on each page we go, we actually have that div with app. And now let's say we want to have the route, which is, let me close that, which will include landing. And this, how we define a specific path is we say we want to exactly match this, and we say what path we want to match. And in our case, it's just /. And this is for landing. Now for projects, we'll have another route, and we'll just encapsulate that as well. And we'll say here the exact path for this is projects. Now, if I didn't do anything wrong, if I go to /projects now, I should get the projects, right? And if I delete this, I get to the main page. And you can see now I actually don't have the things that were previously shown here. So I got rid of the projects that we're seeing here. So we will be able now to actually go to projects and get to the list of projects like this. Okay. And now to this specific project, we'll have to define a more complex route, because we will need some more information there. But for now, what I will do is I will just say that this is exact path equals like project, like that. So if I go to project now, I get an error now because there's an issue with my credentials. I will have to check that in a second. It's not very important. But the thing is, I get to the project page and I can see the information as it should be. So that's the only component that I see, the project component. These other components now only appear when my route is exactly what I said here. This is how routing works with React. And it's really easy to set up. As you saw, it's just a couple of lines. And now our app is kind of the root component that defines each individual route for our app. Is the routing part clear for everyone? Okay, if there are no questions, I cannot see the chat. So Rob, if there is some question that pops up at any point, just let me know. Okay.
Let you know. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And there's a bunch of stuff that you can actually do with routing. I won't really go into all the details, but what I usually do is, for instance, I create my own routes, my own route components, and then I can have something like a private route that is used when users are authenticated. And why that is useful is because using Redux inside the private route component, when it gets to be rendered on the screen, so when the switch actually starts to check the specific paths, it can check if the user is authenticated or not. And if it's not, it can choose to just redirect that user to a page that's available for unregistered users or unsigned users. So yeah, there's a lot of things that you can actually do with routing. And yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg. So I think I can just start now to add the Redux part, because that's the part we're all here. So we'll just jump now into the Redux part and let's see how that works. So with Redux, the only downside is you have to do a lot of boilerplate at the beginning. So you have to add some specific files to actually make Redux work, and you have to set up some you have to do some coding just to initialize everything and make it work. But bear with me. Once you set up that boilerplate code, you don't really bother with that anymore. It's like you do it once, you do it well, you're done with it. And you can just focus on actions, reducers, and so on. So first of all, what we have to do in source is to add a store.js file. And this store file will be what defines our store. This is the one that initializes the store for Redux. And we have to import a bunch of things here. The first one is, I've mentioned at some point that we want our actions to actually do some functionality as well. So for that, we need to apply, we want to use that thunk that I've mentioned. And for that, we have to use a so-called middleware. I don't know if you are familiar with middlewares, but what they do is whenever something, in our case, the Redux dispatch is called, it does something in between. That's the middleware naming. Let's say that's how the middleware name convention was established. It does something in between the dispatch getting executed and you calling the dispatch. And what it does in our case, it will apply the thunk for us. So that's why we have to use this so-called middleware. I know it's a bit tricky to get. So there are a lot of good articles on middlewares and Redux thunk. I will probably let Rob know about this and add some links on YouTube. Is that okay? On YouTube, I'm sorry.
Yep, for sure.
So yeah. So for that, we have to import apply middleware and create store, and these are imported from React Redux. Then we have to import the thunk that I've mentioned, which is from Redux thunk. And then there's the DevTool extension that I've mentioned, and we also want to use that in our app, so we have to import it. So we have to import, what was it? Create. I have to cheat a bit, I'm sorry. It's composed with, okay. It's composed with DevTools from Redux DevTools extension. And there's another thing that we have to import, which is the reducers, right? Because the store is, if you look back to the diagram that we had, the reducers are the ones that update the store. So the store needs to know about the reducers. And I'll just go ahead and add an empty reducer now. And what I usually do is I have a folder that has the reducers. And in here, we need an index.js, which will be our, let's say, the reducer, the main reducer, the one that will combine all the other reducers into one big reducer. So what we have to do here is to import our reducers, which we don't have yet. So I will just leave it as an empty file for now, just to be able to import it here.
David.
So, yes.
Actually, just a quick question. So someone's asked, with regards to the readme.js file, where can they find the constants folder?
Oh, right. So
yeah.
Thank you for telling me that. The
That's fine.
constants folder is not pushed to GitHub because it's just a JavaScript file that contains a token, an authentication token, to actually be able to fetch from GitHub. And the thing is, when I first pushed the repository, it was the authentication token was removed because it's a private sort of thing, so you can't push that. So what you have to do is just create a constants folder, add a default.js there, and just do export const, and then add a name like an auth. That's what we had in README, because if you look at README, it tries to get auth from constants default. So you can, where is it? Here. And this is where you will add your token, whatever that token is. And that's it. That's what the default.js file contains. And if you want to get that authentication token, you just have to say GitHub API key, and then this is the access token page. Let me share this. Oh, I can't share this one. Copy link address, and now I don't know how to bring up the. Can you just share this in the chat?
Is it? It's the /settings/tokens.
Yeah, exactly,
right?
exactly.
Okay, yeah. I'll share that in the chat.
So thank you for telling me that, and let me know. It should work now. If you add your token, it should work properly. You just have to create that with the on that page. So is there anything else, Rob, or can I just go on?
No, that's everything.
Okay, so now what we'll do is we'll import the so-called root reducer from the folder that we created, which is reducers, and this will take the index.js, which is this empty file for now. And now we actually have to create the store. So to create the store, we say const store equals create store. And here we'll have to pass some initial, let's say, values and some things that we want our store to use. So one of them is a middleware. And for that, we'll define another variable called middleware, which is an array that contains all the middlewares we want to apply. In our case, this is just one middleware, and that is the thunk. Done. That's one middleware that we want to use. You can, just not put it like this, but it's kind of it's cleaner to do it this way, because at a later point in your project, you might add some other middleware. So you just come here and just put a comma and say another middleware, and you just add that there, and done. Your store will be created knowing that that middleware has to be applied as well. And then we'll also add some initial state, so like an initial state, and let's say our app has just nothing at first. That's how we usually start. And now here we have to pass some stuff. The first thing is the root reducer, the reducer that contains all the reducers. So that is the one that we've imported here. And then we have to add in the initial state. That's the state we want our store to start with. And then we want to apply these middleware. But now, because we have these DevTools that we also want to use, we'll say that we will compose with DevTools, and then we will apply middleware. And to now actually get all the middlewares, we have to decompose the middleware array. And for that, in JavaScript, you just do ... and the variable. So what this ... does is just, it takes the middleware array and destructures it. It takes each element from there and adds it here. So once we did that, the last thing to do is to export default store. And that's it. We created the store. This is kind of So this store.js file is the one file that you probably never touch again. So you just do it once when you initialize your project, and that's it. You don't touch it again. It's a bit of a boilerplate for this. That's why I cheated a bit, because even I can't remember all the stuff, because I see this file so rarely. So you kind of forget that it actually exists there. So to actually use this store now, we have to go back to our app, to our root, and then we have to import it, right? So we'll just say import store from store. And then I have to cheat again just to make sure I didn't forget. Oh yeah, there's another thing. And that is, we also have to import the so-called provider. And this is just to help us work with middlewares and things like that. This is from React Redux, so it's not from the Redux library that's available. There are just some things that we have to add on top of our app to make it work with the things that we've added to our project. So actually now add the store to our application, we just have to say, we add the provider component, we pass in the store that we created, and we just wrap everything with that. And now we should have a proper store. I think I misspelled that or something like that. Apply, oh, it's actually Redux here. It's not React Redux. So now we have our store. We don't have anything in it, but we have a store. We have a state management container for our app. And to actually show you that that's the truth, I think, okay, let me see exactly what I did wrong here. I think I missed something, or I forgot to, I think I have to add the root reducer to actually make it work, because it expects some reducer, but we have an empty file. So it doesn't really like that. So yeah, I'll just show you in a second how that looks. But now let's just create our root reducer. And what this reducer does is, first, it has this function to combine all the reducers in our app, because usually you have more than one reducer. The reducers usually specialize them in some functionality like authentication, alerts, all sorts of things that your application might do. So that's why you want to have this root reducer. We have combined reducers, and this is from the Redux. And then we say export default, and this is the combined reducers. And for now, we don't have anything. And I hope that fixes it. Yeah, that was the issue. And now to actually show you, we have a state. I think I have to share this one as well, but let me just check that I still have that dev tool. Developer tools. Okay, so I can show you it actually works as it should. Let me share Chrome. Okay, I hope that you can see this one. Rob, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see it?
Yep. Yeah,
okay. So you have to install developer tools in Chrome. It's really easy to find. You just go to the shop. I don't remember how you go there, like Chrome. It's like in apps, and then to the web store. And I guess you just type in Redux. And it's this one, Redux DevTools. Quite easy to get. And then the nice thing here, you see now we have this, let me also see it myself. We have this part where you can basically see all the stuff that's now in your Redux store. We don't have anything yet, but you will see, once we start adding stuff here, we will see each individual reducer. and we will see how they influence the overall state. And the nice thing about this tool is that you can go back in time, see what changes happened. You can do a bunch of things. You can do tests. I don't remember where the tab for that is. Oh, like here, you can do tests here. You can write tests to actually test your states. You can see the differences between the states. You can see the actions, a bunch of things. So this tool is a must for development with Redux because it accelerates a lot. You know, with the React state, you can't actually see the state like this Redux dev tool enables you to. So it's maybe another thing that you might consider to actually use Redux. So okay, so I'm happy that that's working. And now we let me think. The first thing is, I guess, to actually show you something. Let's say in our README, we have this use effect that's called once our once our component, I'm sorry, gets rendered on the screen. And it only does it once because we've left the empty, the dependency array empty. So it will only execute once, like on mount. And the thing is, we have this projects page, right? We would like to, let's say, click on more and go to the specific project that's actually here, right? Or first of all, we would actually like these projects to be from our GitHub repository, right? We would like to fetch these the repositories, put them here, and nicely show them on the screen. So actually, first, let's do that. So how we can do that? Well, we could either go to the not project card. We would have to go to app because this is the one that renders project card. We would have to do a use effect here, fetch the data, store it in our store. Well, I'll just get back to in a second and work with that. But it's quite troublesome to have your effects actually do the fetching part, dispatching the state to Redux and such, because it's not really respecting the standards of Redux. So to actually make our app make use of Redux, we'll create an action for that. And for that, we create another folder which has actions. And here we'll create our first action file, and that is let's call it like repo, or no, let's call this projects.js. So now we have our first action. Let me just make sure everything's okay, right? And here we have to define what we want to do. And we'll do requests with Axios, like, no, we won't do with Axios. We have the Octo library that I've had added in README, the OctoKit library. And that is because we can't make requests towards the GitHub API page from our front-end application because it expects us to set some course headers. These are the CORS, and we can't set that from the client side. We need a server for that. But if you have a Node.js server or a Python server running behind, you can easily do that with Axios. That's how you usually do stuff. But for this demo, we'll just use OctoKit for that. And I will also take the authentication token. I will actually copy this whole thing because it's the same thing. This is what we need here. And now we just create a function that we want to use. So we'll just export const, and let's say this is load projects. And we won't really take, so this will be the tricky part that I've told you about the thunk. So we have now a function, right? If you were to put something like this here, this is a JavaScript inline function, easy peasy to understand. But the problem with actions in Redux is that implicitly they can't really do fetching. They just want to change the state. So if we do it like this, we won't be able to do an asynchronous job like the fetching part without making the whole Redux part not work properly. So for that, that's why in the store, we added this thunk middleware to help us with that. And what we can do is we can actually create another function which will use the dispatch in the end to update the reducers. You will see that in a second. So now what we want to do here, I will just go back to README, is we want to use this OctoKit to make a request to actually get the repository information. So I'll just copy this again, just to gain some time. And here, the correct link for that is we want to do repos, and then it's, I guess I have to save this first. Repos, I have to put in here the user, and then I think that's all to get all the repositories. What we can do first is to do something like a console log on the result to just check. We won't really dispatch anything. We won't update the reducer. We will just console log our information to see that that's right. And we actually can remove this repo here. And right, this is actually an action now. It's an action that doesn't update the reducer, but we have an action in terms of functionality that does a request for us and presumably gets the repository information for my username, which is David Busato Marian. So now to actually call this, let's actually change this part here. Let's create a component that's called projects.js, which will handle all the projects. I'll just use the shorthand command to generate the component quickly for me. And then I will take this part from here, and I will put that here. I will take this part, put it in here, and then I will also have to import this and put it here. And so here now, instead of what we had, we'll have projects like this. Okay, now the projects card here, it's not in the right position because we are already in components. So I just have to remove that. So I didn't mess up anything, so everything works as it should. So now let's call our action that we created, this load projects. So to do that, there's again some boilerplate that we have to add. And one of them is we have to import a so-called connect function from our Redux. Was it Redux? I have to check that if it's Redux or React Redux. Okay, so from React Redux. And what this connect does is, it's quite intuitive by the name. It will connect our component to the Redux store to actually get the state from there, to get the actions that are available, and so on. So we have to come down here where we export our projects, and we have to say now connect. And here we will have some other stuff that we have to add. I will get back to that when we'll talk about getting the state. And here we have to add our component name. So now we connected our projects to the Redux store, but I guess we have to pass in null here, otherwise it won't work. Well, I will have to double check that. So now to actually get the action, we have to import it just like we do with any other function. So we will import, where is it? It's load projects. And this is from our actions project. And to be able to use it, we have to pass it in here from this connect. This connect actually enables us to take any action out of our Redux store. So to take that out is like getting the props. So we just have to deserialize that. It's just, instead of saying props.load projects, if we deserialize it here, we can now access load projects whenever we want. So now to call load projects, which I don't want to call it. Yeah, I will just use a use effect here, which I hope you are familiar with the syntax of it. And then here we just say load projects. And that's it. We will call our well, let me also import use effect from React. We'll call load projects from our Redux actions. And then if I go back here, okay, let me check what did I mess up here. Oh, right, I passed in here null, but actually I have to pass in here the specific function, the specific action that I want to use in here. So if I want to use a function, I have to pass it in here. So the first thing is null, that's related to the state. We'll get to that in a second. And here we'll pass in the function, which is load project, because otherwise Redux won't be able to find the function for us. Now, okay, I get the bad credentials. I guess I've messed up my credentials again for some reason. Let me quickly check that. Okay. Okay, Rob, until I'm checking this quickly, can if anyone has any sort of questions, I know it's quite a lot to get at first.
Yeah, you can post them in the chat and I'll read them out if you don't want to say them out loud.
Seems like I don't have any other tokens. I have to generate one again.
Yeah, maybe it's yeah. Do you need to have a fresh token? Could that be it?
It seems like I have to create a new one, but shouldn't take too long. Do you have any questions, Rob, if you followed along?
Not right now. I think you're making it pretty clear. I think it's pretty easy to follow along. I guess because I know you sent this repo to me earlier, and this was one of the issues I was having with the bad credentials. So if you get to solve it, well, that's a different error at least.
Yeah, it's the link, so that should work. Let me come back to this.
So that was just a solution by changing the token, was it? By updating the token. Okay.
Exactly. It was just a token that I had to change.
Okay. Sweet.
So let me quickly get to this part here. Was it? Can't believe I forgot again. What was the link for it? Don't need repo. I need. Is it user then? Oh, it's like this. Yeah, I'm sorry. So it was this way, and I actually don't need the user anymore because it will get inferred by the token, right? I'm sorry. So if I look at the console now, ignoring all these errors that were previously generated, now I get this, in our action here, we console log our result. So if I look here, you see now I get this data that contains all the repositories that are available to me. And now we can use this, we can store this, we will store this now in our Redux store, and we'll actually dynamically generate this part here where the project name will be the name that we actually get from the repo. So now that we know that's working, we have to do the following. We'll have to dispatch this information. And to dispatch, we call dispatch, which is a function, and we pass in here an object, a JavaScript object. And we have two things that we have to mention, a type, and I'll get to that in a second, and a payload. And in our case, we only care about the data part of our result. So that's result data. That's the payload. That's the information that we actually want to use. So what this type is, what I usually like to do is to have some strings, some constant strings that define these types. So I'll just create another folder, which is not folder, I'm sorry, another file in actions, which is the types.js. And here we'll do export const, and let's say this is load projects, which is load projects, like this. This is just a string, but it's easier to use it this way because we can easily change afterwards the values of strings, because we'll use this type in the reducer as well. So it helps us maintain our code easily. So this will be load projects. Now I'll get that automatically imported for me. But now we don't have the reducer that can handle this. So inside reducers, I will create a new file. Let's call this projects.js. And it's quite easy. What we have to do here is we have to provide an initial state again, which in our case, we'll just say our projects initially is an empty array because we don't have any fetched objects. And then we have to export a function, which is the reducer function, which does the reducing, the passing of data from the action to the store. We'll see that in a second. So we'll export const function, and this is called projects, which is, and this, no, I shouldn't define like this. It's like, can't define functions in this way. It's so strange when you always define functions in linear way to just suddenly start defining them like this. So yeah, I don't have to name this. It's just a function. And it has to be default, not const. And this function takes two main things: a state, which initially is the initial state, and an action. And this action is the action function that's been executed. And from this action, we care about the type and the payload. So we can take out the type and the payload from the action. This is just another JavaScript syntactic sugar to not say action.type and action.payload. Right. So what does the reducer do? It just does a switch on the type. So based on what type we get, we will check if this is the correct reducer to handle this specific type of action. And in our case, we want to handle load projects. And to actually handle this, we have to, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the case keyword. What we want to do is we have to update the state and we have to return that because that's taken by the store. So we will return, in our case, we have the object, which is, this is the object state. Whatever state we had previously has to stay there because we might have other reducers and other actions that might have influenced the state in some way. So we want to keep whatever state is changed by them or whatever state we had previously. And then we want to add our changes. So we will say that projects will be equal with the payload. No, it's with columns like this. And what's really essential with reducer is we have to have a default case. So when the types of these reducers doesn't match with the actions that have been emitted, we'd have to just return the state. We don't have to change it. We just have to return whatever state was previously set. And now we have to go to our root reducer and we have to import this projects from projects like this and just add it here. Hope I didn't mess it up. No, it's like this. So now if we refresh this page, nothing changed yet. But if you go to the Redux dev tool, you see now we have an action that has been dispatched for us. And what we can see is that the projects with green, they are marked the changes. We now have the stuff that we previously console logged inside data. So this is why this dev tool is really nice. You can already see our states being fetched, everything's been set accordingly, and our projects now are set as it should. So let me just change one thing. I just make this projects array just to not confuse it with the name of the reducer. You'll see that why. And now let's go back to our projects. And let's say now we want to use this state. We want to use this project. What we have to do is we have to take out that specific reducer from the store, because that reducer contains the state that we are interested in, the projects array. So we'll have a so-called map state to props, which is it takes the state, which is the Redux state, and it maps that to props that are used by our component. And this is a function that takes the state and it returns an object for us. And what this does is we have to take out I'm sorry, I can't speak. We have to let me double check that just to not mess it up now. We have to take out the specific reducer that we care about. So in our case, it's the projects, this reducer, projects reducer. So we'll say projects will be state.projects. Okay, so we took out the project state out of the reducers project. And to actually use that now, this is where this null actually has to be changed with map state to props. So now we actually import the state that we care about, and we have to add that as props because that is what we said. So we'll add projects here as props. And to just show you that that works, I'll just remove this. What did I do? I'll just remove this. And I'll come back here. And now I won't say projects.map because you will see I get an error now because projects is not a function. If you remember, the projects is the whole state. So it's an object. And we have to take from there projects array. That's why I said I don't want to confuse you with that. And now I probably, oh, right. There's one thing here. I have to take index from here. React likes to have this sort of key prop to each of the things that you render dynamically, just to not mess things up. And yeah, that was the complaint that React had previously. But now let me close the DevTools. Nothing changed, but you see I have more projects because this is all the repos that I have. But to actually make this usable, now this projects card should, let's see, at least render the name of the project. So I'll pass in here as props p.name, which is the individual project from which we take the name. I will go to projects card. I will take name here as props. And instead of saying project name, I will say name here. So you see now I get all the names. Now, of course, my styling went off because I didn't know the names could be so big and I made it quite dynamic. But yeah, you can see I have a bunch of, oh, this is the DSC Redux one. So you can see it's actually the real stuff. And yeah, now I have all the information I need about the repositories. And what I could do now is simply, whenever I click on this, I will go to the project page and see the stuff from there. To the ones that are present, do you think you can stay 5 more minutes to implement that as well? Do you think that's doable?
Yeah, I think it would be fine. And worst case, if anyone has to leave, as we said before, this will be on YouTube, so you can catch up there.
Okay,
but
so
yeah.
now, thank you. So now let's say in projects card here, we have this more link. Let's make this a link. So this will be, right, we can't use A's inside the A tag inside React because that doesn't work with the router. So we have to specifically import link from React router DOM. And I hope I didn't mess that up. No, it's okay. And now we'll just add in here a link. And this will point to, and we have to add the backticks in here. It will point to /project. That's the one that we defined in app.js. Remember, this was /project. And just say it's just that for now. And here it's more. So what did I do wrong? Did I not import the right thing, I guess? No, that's fine. Could it be my styling is actually off? Oh yeah, I think the color. Okay, now it's not really nice, but you get the point. Now, if I go here, you see, I got to my projects page. So that's how you can easily link your components now using links to that. So we just said this is the right link that we want to go to. When I click more, I will go that. And we have to use this one because this knows about the router that we set up in app.js, so it can recognize the links. So now let's say we don't really just, I don't want to say this is a Python cheat sheet because I've clicked on the CEO project. So what I can do, I go back to our app.js and I want to add a parameter to our link here and call this name, for instance. And what this does is we will be able to take this this parameter out of the link inside our component in order to actually fetch the right repository. So now if I go back here, instead of saying this, I will actually add in here the name as well. So as you can see, if I now click more, I go to project/CEO project. Although I didn't use that yet, I can now make use of this link, this parameter that's been passed to me. So if I go to project, I can say now there's this prop that we can use to actually access arguments that have been passed down from the link to us. Let me just double check if I need props for that because I don't really remember. Just 1 second. Okay, I have to pass it as props. So I have to pass a so-called match. This is a React props that we can use, part of the React props that we can use to get things from the URL. So instead of saying, instead of just passing in here readme, I will say the name will be match.name. And inside readme now, I have to take out this name as a props. And just to check it actually works, inside this use effect, I would say console log the name. So, okay, I have a property name of undefined. Let me see what I did wrong there. Where is it? Project. I have match. Not sure I did it wrong. Oh, I'm stupid. It's yeah. So it's the parameters that we want to get from the match. We just said match.name, and that doesn't work. Okay, still messed it up somehow. Not sure exactly how I messed this up. Right, so just because I don't want to hold you more, I guess I can just show you, for instance, how to deploy this to GitHub Pages. Because yeah, but basically what I wanted to show you is you take out the name from the parameters, you go to your README now, and instead of just saying here this repo variable that was hard coded, you would just take name instead. So now if this were to work accordingly, it would take that out. But let me see exactly why doesn't it work. Oh, I think what it doesn't like is inside here. I think I have to specifically say this takes the component project, and then I won't define it in this way. so that, okay. Oh, not found. Okay, that's interesting. At least we get the name. The thing was, we had the component that we wanted to render inside the route, and route expects some, it has this prop component that actually passes through it. Now it's a bit more complicated what route does, but the thing was, it couldn't actually set the match object for our project component because we put that inside the route. But now let me check why this doesn't work accordingly. Let's see if I console log the name. It's nice debugging all styles with CO project, but we still don't have the right repo. Right, I'm not sure exactly why doesn't that work. So it might be that I don't have a README for this one. Let me check that. Which one knows? I know for sure has one. Well, it's the DSC. Yeah. So the issue was that that project didn't have the README file. But hey, now also let's change the project name goes here part. If I go to here, where is it? No, it's not the README. I'm sorry, it's the project. Instead of saying project name goes here, I will say again, match parameters dot name, and we'll have that here. Boom, we have DSC Redux, and we can also pass in the description if we want. That's the small part that appears on your GitHub repository. But hey, you can see now we actually get the content dynamically for each of our project if we have a README for that project. So now the last part to do, the last part that we can do is deploy this and see that it actually works on GitHub Pages. So for that, in package.json, let me close all this stuff here. In package.json, you can see that I have to change this homepage. So you have to change this to your username. And then I have these two scripts here that are set up for me. So if I just want to deploy this, I have this project set up with Yarn, but it's the same thing as npm. You just say npm instead of Yarn, and then run deploy. And now this will prepare the React package for production, and will also deploy to GitHub Pages. But before that, what I wanted to emphasize is you will also need to create, you see this part here, you would actually want to make this an action as well. So you could create another action inside projects that would be called get project, and that would actually do this part from README here, the one that gets the README. And then you would again connect this with Redux, take out the action from there, and use it inside your component. So yeah, why would you want to do that? Well, on your portfolio, maybe you won't really use the README. I would just thinking that you might design your README in some nice way, and you can nicely show that on your web page. But maybe you could find some use case later on in your application where you want to render or you want to get that README again. So if you have the action, you just use the action. If you don't have the action, you have to basically copy and paste this part in the other component. So yeah, Redux is really efficient to help you out with that sort of thing. So now if everything's right, I should go to David, to my username .github.io/ I think it's DCS, DSC, I'm sorry, course. I think I've renamed that. I take the right, oh, DSC Redux. Is it this one? Okay. Let me. I will just quickly double check why that's not the case. Let me see. Okay, right. If anyone has some questions until I try to fix this one.
Yep, I think it should
Oh,
only be a
it
couple more
was,
minutes, right?
yeah, it was just a typo issue, but yeah, it should work. I think it's just another thing that's related to routing that I might have forgotten to add because I get the 404 error, but that's the flow. If you want to deploy it, it should work like this. I'm sorry, I can't really show you that. But I hope you got to get the gist of Redux and you've enjoyed this workshop. And thank you so much for staying till the end.
Yeah, and thanks to David for running the workshop again. A great conclusion to the React workshop, I guess. But yeah, no. If there are any more questions, anyone can feel free to post in the chat, or I guess you can message either myself or David after. Also, the whole workshop will actually be on YouTube as per usual. It'll be on both the CSS and DSC YouTube channels. But if you're active in the Discord, we'll post it there as well. So it will be on the announcement sometime soon, within the next couple of days. I think that's all there is to say. I'll end the recording now.